The massive steel doors of the Galactic Military Academy's training facility hissed open, revealing the largest combat arena Marcus had ever seen. The human cadet stepped through the entrance, his worn boots echoing against the polished metal floor. Above him, tier upon tier of seats stretched toward a domed ceiling that displayed the swirling colors of a nebula. The arena could hold 50,000 spectators, but today only about 200 aliens filled the lower sections. Marcus Chen had been at the Academy for 6 months now, ever since Earth had finally been accepted into the Galactic Alliance. He was the first human to attend the prestigious military school, and every day reminded him of that fact. The other cadets towered over his modest 6-foot frame. The Krillian students stood nearly 9 feet tall with 4 arms and chitinous armor covering their bodies. The Vorthak cadets moved like liquid metal, their silvery skin shifting and flowing as they walked. Even the smallest aliens, the fox-like Zanari, possessed natural speed that made them blur when they ran. But it wasn't their physical advantages that bothered Marcus the most. It was the constant whispers, the sideways glances, the barely concealed laughter whenever he struggled with exercises designed for beings twice his strength. They called humans the weak species when they thought he couldn't hear. Some were more direct about it. "Look who decided to show up," came a deep, rumbling voice from across the arena floor. Marcus turned to see Thrax approaching. The Krillian was nearly 10 feet tall, his black carapace gleaming under the arena lights. 2 of his 4 arms ended in natural weapons, bone spikes that could punch through steel plating. The other 2 arms were more like human hands, but each finger ended in a claw. Thrax was the top combat student in their class, undefeated in arena matches for 2 years running. Behind Thrax came his usual group of followers. There was Zephyr, a Vorthak whose liquid metal body could form weapons at will. Beside him walked Kess, a Zanari whose natural speed had earned him the nickname Lightning. The group represented the 3 most physically dominant species at the Academy. "We heard you finally signed up for arena combat?" Thrax continued, his mandibles clicking in what passed for a Krillian smile. "I have to admit I'm surprised. I didn't think humans were capable of that kind of courage." Marcus felt his jaw clench. "I signed up because it's a requirement for graduation, same as everyone else." Zephyr's form rippled, and his arm shifted into a blade. "Oh, but it's not the same, is it? When we fight, it's a contest between warriors. When you fight, it's more like entertainment." The small crowd in the stands had noticed the confrontation. Marcus could hear excited chittering and the electronic warbles that passed for speech among some species. Word was spreading quickly through the Academy's communication networks. Within minutes, hundreds more students would be flooding into the arena. Kess darted around Marcus so fast he appeared as a blur, stopping directly in front of him. "Face it, human. Your species barely qualified for Alliance membership. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. What could you possibly do in a combat arena except provide amusement for the rest of us?" Marcus had heard variations of this speech countless times. Humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Alliance, and their admission had been controversial. Most Alliance species possessed significant physical advantages, natural weapons, enhanced senses, or special abilities that made them formidable. Humans seemed average in comparison, excelling at nothing in particular. "Maybe that's exactly why I should be here," Marcus said quietly. Thrax's mandibles clicked louder, a sound of genuine amusement. "Is that supposed to be threatening? You do realize what happens in arena combat, don't you? This isn't some simulation or training exercise. Real weapons, real consequences. Students have died in there." The arena floor was a circle roughly 200 feet in diameter, surrounded by energy barriers that could stop most weapons. The surface was covered in a special material that could shift and change during combat, creating obstacles, elevated platforms, or environmental hazards. Weapons racks lined the outer edge, containing everything from simple bladed weapons to advanced energy rifles. More students were filing into the stands now. Marcus could see representatives from dozens of species, the crystalline Valdari, whose bodies could deflect energy weapons, the insectoid Zac with their compound eyes and natural acid production, the gaseous Etherians floating in their containment suits. All of them had come to watch the human embarrass himself. "I know exactly what arena combat involves," Marcus said. "And I know I'm not the strongest or fastest person here, but I also know something you don't." "And what's that?" Thrax asked, leaning down until his massive head was level with Marcus's face. "You've never fought a human before." The Krillian's laugh was like grinding stone. "No, we haven't, because humans have never been foolish enough to enter our arenas. Tell me, little human, what makes you think your species has anything to offer in combat? Your ancestors fought with primitive weapons on a single world. We've been warriors for thousands of years across dozens of star systems." Marcus looked around at the growing crowd. He could see Professor Corvash, the Academy's combat instructor, making his way down to the arena floor. The Iridian's 6 legs carried him with mechanical precision, his sensor stalks swiveling to assess the situation. Other faculty members were appearing in the upper sections of the stands. "That's just it," Marcus said, turning back to Thrax. "You've been warriors. We've been survivors." He walked toward the center of the arena, not waiting for a response. Behind him, he could hear rapid conversation in several alien languages. Translators chirped and warbled as species tried to communicate with each other about what they were witnessing. Professor Corvash reached the arena floor, his metallic voice carrying clearly. "Cadet Chen, what is the meaning of this gathering?" Before Marcus could answer, Thrax spoke up. "The human has finally decided to participate in arena combat, Professor. We were simply welcoming him to the experience." The Iridian's sensor stalks focused on Marcus. "Is this true, Cadet? You wish to engage in sanctioned combat?" "Yes, sir. I've submitted the proper forms and completed the required safety briefings." "Very well. Who will serve as your opponent?" The question hung in the air for a moment. In the silence, Marcus could hear the hum of the arena's energy systems and the excited murmur of the crowd. He knew this was his chance. He could choose someone closer to his own size, perhaps one of the smaller Zanari students. He could make this easier on himself. Instead, he pointed directly at Thrax. The arena erupted in noise. Alien voices rose in surprise, excitement, and what sounded like concern. Some species were making sounds Marcus had never heard before. In the stands, students were leaning forward, their various sensory organs focused intently on the scene below. Thrax's 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of amazement. "You want to fight me? Human, I have defeated opponents twice your size. My natural weapons can pierce military-grade armor. Are you certain you understand what you're proposing?" Marcus nodded. "I understand perfectly. And yes, I want to fight you." Professor Corvash's sensor stalks swiveled between the 2 cadets. "This is highly irregular. Cadet Thrax, you are under no obligation to accept this challenge. The physical disparity between your species is significant." "Oh, I accept," Thrax rumbled. "How could I refuse such an educational opportunity? When shall we arrange this combat?" Marcus looked up at the packed stands, at the hundreds of aliens who had come to watch him fail. He thought about the months of condescending remarks, the casual dismissal of his species, the assumption that humans had nothing valuable to contribute to the galaxy. "Now," he said simply. Professor Corvash's mechanical voice rose in pitch. "Impossible. Arena combat requires preparation, safety protocols, medical teams in position." "All of which can be arranged within the hour," Thrax interrupted. "Unless the human is having second thoughts?" Marcus shook his head. "No second thoughts. 1 hour is fine." The Krillian's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Excellent. I should warn you, human, that I will not hold back simply because your species is fragile. In the arena, you will face the same treatment I would give any opponent. I wouldn't want it any other way. As the crowd began to disperse to prepare for the coming combat, Marcus remained on the arena floor. He looked up at the weapons racks, mentally cataloging the options available. Most were designed for species with natural advantages he lacked. The energy weapons required precise aim and were designed for beings with enhanced reflexes. The melee weapons were sized for aliens much larger than humans. But there, in the corner of one rack, he spotted something that made him smile. A simple metal staff, roughly 6 feet long. It looked almost primitive compared to the advanced weaponry surrounding it, probably included as a training tool for younger cadets. Marcus walked over and lifted the staff, testing its weight and balance. It felt right in his hands, reminding him of the martial arts training he'd pursued back on Earth. His instructors had always emphasized that weapons were tools, extensions of the warrior's mind and body. The most advanced technology in the galaxy couldn't replace proper training and tactical thinking. He began moving through basic forms, the staff spinning and flowing in his hands. The movements felt natural, automatic. Around the arena, maintenance crews were already beginning their preparations. Energy barriers hummed to life, medical stations activated, and recording equipment descended from hidden panels in the ceiling. In 1 hour, Marcus would face an opponent who outweighed him by several hundred pounds, possessed natural weapons that could punch through armor, and had years of combat experience. The safe choice would be to forfeit, to claim he'd made his point simply by issuing the challenge. But Marcus had no intention of forfeiting. He had something to prove, not just to the aliens who dismissed his species, but to himself and to every human who would follow in his footsteps. Earth's children were about to show the galaxy that being underestimated could be the greatest advantage of all. The staff spun faster in his hands as he moved through increasingly complex patterns. Soon, very soon, everyone would learn that humans might not be the strongest or fastest species in the galaxy, but they were something else entirely. They were unpredictable. The arena had transformed in the past hour. What had been empty seats now overflowed with aliens from across the galaxy. Word had spread through the Academy's networks and beyond, reaching military bases, research stations, and even civilian populations on nearby worlds. The viewing platforms designed for 200 spectators now held over 3,000 beings, with more arriving every minute. Marcus stood in the preparation chamber, a small room adjacent to the main arena. Through the transparent wall, he could see Thrax in the opposite chamber, methodically checking his natural weapons. The Krillian was performing what looked like a ritual, his 4 arms moving in precise patterns, while his mandibles clicked in rhythm. Combat meditation, Marcus realized. The alien was treating this seriously despite his earlier confidence. A soft chime indicated 5 minutes until combat began. Marcus closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, a technique his martial arts instructors had drilled into him since childhood. In his mind, he reviewed everything he knew about Krillian physiology and combat doctrine. Krillians were apex predators on their homeworld, evolved for hunting creatures even larger than themselves. Their bone spikes could extend from their arms at will, reaching lengths of up to 3 feet. Their carapace was naturally resistant to energy weapons and could absorb significant kinetic impact. They preferred direct confrontation, using their superior reach and natural armor to overwhelm opponents. But Marcus had noticed something during his months at the Academy. For all their physical advantages, most alien species fought in predictable patterns based on their evolutionary development. The Krillians charged forward and relied on their natural weapons. The Vorthak flowed around obstacles and reformed to attack from unexpected angles. The Zanari used their speed to strike quickly and retreat. Humans had no such evolutionary combat programming. They had learned to fight with tools, to adapt to any situation, to use their environment as a weapon. On Earth, the physically weakest predator had become the apex hunter through intelligence, creativity, and pure, stubborn refusal to give up. The preparation chamber door slid open. Professor Corvash appeared, his sensor stalks focused on Marcus. "Cadet Chen, I must ask one final time. Are you certain you wish to proceed? There is no shame in acknowledging a mismatch." "I'm certain, Professor." "Very well. Are you familiar with arena combat rules?" Marcus nodded. "Combat continues until one participant yields, becomes unable to continue, or—" He paused. "Or dies," Professor Corvash finished. "Yes, lethal force is permitted, though discouraged between students. Medical teams are standing by, but they cannot intervene during active combat. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "You may select one weapon from the available racks. Choose wisely." Marcus walked onto the arena floor, and the noise from the crowd was deafening. 3,000 voices in dozens of languages created a wall of sound that seemed to shake the arena's foundations. He could see beings in the stands that he'd never encountered before, species from the far reaches of Alliance space who had somehow learned about this match and traveled here to witness it. The weapons racks had been refreshed and expanded for the formal combat. Energy rifles with enough power to punch through starship hulls stood beside ancient ceremonial swords from a dozen different worlds. Explosive devices, plasma weapons, and projectile guns offered every conceivable option for mayhem. Marcus walked past all of them and picked up the same simple metal staff he'd tested earlier. The crowd's noise shifted, confusion replacing excitement. In the viewing boxes reserved for Academy faculty, he could see professors leaning forward, their various sensory organs focused on him with obvious bewilderment. He was facing a natural-born killer with what amounted to a stick. Across the arena, Thrax emerged from his preparation chamber. The Krillian had selected no weapon at all, relying entirely on his natural advantages. His bone spikes had already extended to their full length, creating 4 3-foot blades that gleamed under the arena lights. He moved with predatory grace, each step calculated and purposeful. The two combatants approached the center of the arena. Up close, the size difference was even more dramatic. Thrax towered over Marcus by nearly 4 feet, his reach advantage enormous even before considering his extended weapons. The alien's black carapace reflected the arena lights like polished armor. "Last chance to reconsider, human," Thrax rumbled. "I respect your courage, but courage won't save you from physics." Marcus gripped his staff with both hands, feeling its familiar weight. Physics work both ways. Professor Corvash positioned himself at the edge of the combat area. "Combatants, prepare for engagement. Begin on my mark." His mechanical voice carried clearly over the crowd noise. 3, 2, 1, begin. Thrax immediately charged forward, exactly as Marcus had expected. The Krillian's strategy was simple and effective. Use superior size and reach to end the fight quickly. His upper bone spikes thrust toward Marcus's chest, while his lower arms swept wide to prevent escape. Marcus didn't try to escape. Instead, he dropped low and rolled forward, passing directly between Thrax's legs. The staff spun in his hands, striking hard against the back of the Krillian's knee joint, one of the few areas where the carapace was thinner to allow for movement. The alien stumbled but didn't fall. He spun around with surprising speed, his rear arms already swinging toward where Marcus had been. But the human had kept rolling, coming up near the arena's edge where the weapons racks stood. "Clever," Thrax admitted, "but tricks won't work twice." The Krillian advanced more cautiously now, his forearms spread to control space and prevent another rolling attack. This time he approached like a traditional duelist, using his reach advantage to probe for openings while staying balanced and ready to counter. Marcus began moving laterally, circling the larger opponent while staying just outside striking range. He held the staff in a guard position, occasionally making small movements that forced Thrax to adjust his positioning. To the crowd, It looked like Marcus was simply delaying the inevitable. But Marcus was studying his opponent, cataloging every movement pattern, every slight telegraph that preceded an attack. Thrax's upper right arm dipped slightly before each thrust. His lower left arm extended first when he attempted wide sweeps. Small tells that would be meaningless against another Krillian, but precious information for someone looking for patterns. Thrax grew impatient with the circling and launched another assault. This time he varied his approach, feinting with his upper arms before striking with the lower ones. The bone spikes whistled through the air where Marcus's torso had been a split second earlier. Marcus had read the feint and was already moving, but instead of rolling away, he stepped inside the Krillian's guard. The staff spun upward, striking Thrax's extended lower right arm at the elbow joint with a sharp crack. The alien's bone spike retracted involuntarily, and his arm hung limp. The crowd erupted in surprise. First blood to the human, and more than that, he demonstrated that the seemingly invincible Krillian could be hurt. Thrax roared in pain and anger, his remaining 3 arms lashing out wildly, but the injury had disrupted his balance and coordination. Marcus flowed around the clumsy attacks, his staff striking precisely at joint vulnerable points. The Krillian's left knee, the soft tissue beneath his right shoulder, the nerve cluster near his neck. Each strike was calculated for maximum effect, with minimal energy expenditure. Marcus wasn't trying to overpower his opponent. He was systematically dismantling him. But Thrax was far from defeated. The alien caught on to Marcus's strategy and began protecting his vulnerable points, keeping his remaining 3 arms in tight defensive positions. His natural armor absorbed several staff strikes without significant damage. "You fight like a scavenger," Thrax snarled. "No honor, no strength, just picking at weak spots." "I fight to win," Marcus replied simply. The Krillian's eyes narrowed. "Then let's see how your precision serves against brute force." Thrax threw himself forward in a berserker charge, abandoning all defense. His 3 remaining bone spikes thrust forward simultaneously, while his powerful legs drove him toward Marcus like a living battering ram. It was a desperation move, but potentially effective. Either Marcus would be skewered, or he'd be forced to retreat and give up the momentum he'd built. Instead, Marcus did something completely unexpected. He threw his staff. The metal rod spun end over end through the air, striking Thrax directly in the center of his face. The impact wasn't enough to seriously injure the Krillian, but it was enough to disrupt his charge and obscure his vision for a crucial second. In that second, Marcus dove to the side, rolled, and came up with something he'd grabbed from the weapons rack, a small handheld device that most aliens would dismiss as primitive, a human invention called a stun gun. The device had been included in the weapon selection almost as a curiosity. Most Alliance species had natural electrical resistance or could simply absorb the energy with their enhanced physiology. For them, it was little more than an annoyance. But humans had designed stun guns specifically to incapacitate beings with human-level electrical sensitivity. And Marcus had noticed something during his months of study. Krillians, for all their natural armor, had nervous systems remarkably similar to Earth arthropods. He triggered the device as Thrax recovered from the staff strike. 50,000 volts arced across the gap between them, and the massive alien convulsed. His bone spikes retracted involuntarily as his nervous system overloaded. He crashed to the arena floor, twitching and unable to control his movements. The arena fell silent. 3,000 spectators stared in disbelief as the Academy's undefeated combat champion lay helpless on the floor, defeated by the weakest species in the Alliance. Marcus walked over to where Thrax lay. The Krillian's eyes tracked him, conscious but unable to move. "Do you yield?" Marcus asked quietly. Thrax's mandibles moved slightly. "How?" he managed to whisper. "I told you," Marcus said. "You've never fought a human before. We don't fight to prove we're stronger. We fight to survive. And survivors use whatever works." He looked up at Professor Korvash. He yields. The professor's sensor stalk swiveled between the two combatants. Cadet Thrax, do you acknowledge defeat? The Krillian's voice was barely audible over the arena's systems. I yield. The arena erupted. 3,000 voices rose in a cacophony of amazement, discussion, and what could only be described as alarm. The unthinkable had happened. The human had won. But as Marcus looked up at the crowd, he realized this was only the beginning. In the faculty viewing area, he could see professors engaged in heated discussion. On the general viewing levels, representatives from dozens of species were communicating rapidly with their homeworlds. News of this fight would spread across the galaxy within hours. The species that everyone had dismissed as weak had just demonstrated capabilities no one had expected. And judging by the expressions he could read on various alien faces, not everyone was pleased by this development. Marcus retrieved his staff from where it had fallen and walked toward the arena exit. Behind him, medical teams were attending to Thrax, checking for permanent damage from the electrical shock. The Krillian would recover fully, but his reputation as an unbeatable warrior was finished forever. As Marcus reached the exit, he heard his name called. He turned to see a group of alien cadets approaching. Not the usual suspects who tormented him, but beings he'd never spoken to before. Representatives from species across the academy. Human, one of them said, a crystalline Valdari whose voice chimed like wind through glass. We would like to speak with you. Marcus paused. About what? About how you did that, the Valdari replied. And about what it means for the rest of us. Looking at their faces, or the equivalent sensory organs for species that didn't have faces, Marcus could see a mixture of respect, curiosity, and something else. Something that looked very much like fear. The galaxy was about to learn that humans brought more to the Alliance than anyone had realized. But whether that would prove to be a blessing or a curse remained to be seen. 3 days had passed since Marcus's victory over Thrax, and the Galactic Military Academy felt like a completely different place. Where once he'd walked through empty corridors with only the occasional contemptuous glance, now crowds of alien students followed his every movement. Some wanted to study him like a specimen, others sought to understand his fighting techniques, and a concerning number seemed to be evaluating him as a potential threat. Marcus sat in the Academy's main library, trying to focus on his stellar navigation assignment while ignoring the dozen different species positioned at nearby tables, all pretending to study while actually observing him. The crystalline Valdari from after the fight, who'd introduced herself as Prisma, had become his most persistent follower. She claimed to be researching human combat psychology for her thesis, but Marcus suspected there was more to it. The recordings have been analyzed by military experts across 17 systems, she was saying, her voice creating harmonious tones in the quiet library space. The consensus is troubling. Marcus looked up from his star charts. Troubling how? Prisma's crystalline form shifted colors, moving from clear blue to a worried amber. You didn't just defeat Thrax through luck or surprise. You demonstrated strategic thinking that's fundamentally different from any known species. The Krillian High Command has requested a full review of human capabilities. Because I won a student fight? Because you won it in a way no one can replicate or counter. Watch. Prisma activated a holographic display showing recordings from the arena fight. The images showed Marcus's movements in slow motion, analyzed from multiple angles. Trajectory lines traced his attacks, timing markers showed the precise moments of each strike. Every Alliance species has predictable combat patterns, Prisma explained. We've been fighting each other for centuries. We know how Krillians think, how Vorthax flow, how Zanari speed strike. But this, she gestured at the display, this follows no known pattern. Marcus watched himself on the recording, seeing the fight from the crowd's perspective for the first time. He had to admit it looked different from outside. More calculated, more systematic than he'd realized while it was happening. "You adapted your strategy 3 times during a 5-minute fight," Prisma continued. "First, you tested Thrax's reflexes and identified weak points. Then you systematically targeted those weaknesses while avoiding his strengths. Finally, you improvised a solution using a weapon combination no military analyst had ever considered. It's called thinking on your feet. Don't other species do that?" Prisma's color shifted to deep purple. "Not like this. Most species develop along evolutionary lines that create specific cognitive patterns. Warriors fight like warriors, hunters hunt like hunters, builders build like builders. But humans seem to be generalists. You can adopt any role as needed." Around the library, Marcus could feel the attention of other students. Some were close enough to overhear the conversation, and their reactions varied dramatically. The insectoid Zach students clicked their mandibles in what he'd learned meant agitation. A group of gaseous Etherians floated closer, their containment suits glowing brighter with excitement. "Look," Marcus said, closing his navigation texts. "I appreciate the analysis, but I'm just trying to graduate and serve in the Alliance military like everyone else here." "That's exactly the problem," came a new voice. Marcus turned to see Admiral Corthex approaching. The massive Draconian's scales shifted from dark blue to battle red as he moved, a sure sign of agitation. Behind him walked Professor Corvash and 2 other faculty members Marcus didn't recognize. The library fell silent. Students throughout the chamber stopped pretending to study and focused entirely on the confrontation developing near Marcus's table. Admiral Corthex stopped directly in front of Marcus, his 12-foot height forcing the human to crane his neck upward. "Cadet Chen, you will come with us, now!" It wasn't a request. Marcus gathered his materials and followed the group out of the library, acutely aware that every student was tracking their movement. The corridor outside buzzed with conversation the moment they were gone. They walked in silence through the Academy's administrative section, past offices Marcus had never seen before. Finally, they stopped at a conference room deep in the facility's core. The room was designed for high-level meetings, with seating and environmental controls for dozens of different species. "Sit," Admiral Corthex commanded, gesturing to a human-sized chair at the conference table. Marcus sat and found himself facing 5 of the Academy's most senior officers. Admiral Corthex represented the Draconian military. General Vrex, whose mechanical augmentations replaced most of his original cyborg body, spoke for the Technology Alliance. Commander Thessia, a flowing energy being contained in a specialized suit, represented the Etherian collective. "Cadet Chen," Admiral Corthex began, "your recent combat performance has raised questions about human military capabilities. We require answers." "What kind of questions, sir?" General Vrex leaned forward, his mechanical voice crackling with static. "Strategic questions, Cadet. Your species was admitted to the Alliance based on technological contributions and resource availability. Military assessment of human combat potential was minimal. Because humans appeared to lack significant martial advantages," Commander Thessia added, her voice emanating from her containment suit's speakers. "No natural weapons, limited physical capabilities, standard intelligence ratings. Your application focused on industrial capacity and research potential." Professor Corvash's sensor stalks rotated toward Marcus. "However, your performance against Cadet Thrax suggests our assessments may have been incomplete. The combat techniques you displayed are not in any human military database we've accessed." Marcus felt a chill. They'd been studying human military records. "I learned martial arts as a hobby, sir. It's common on Earth." "Martial arts?" Admiral Corthex's scales darkened further. "You're referring to organized combat training practiced by civilian populations?" "Yes, sir." The 5 officers exchanged glances. General Vrex was the first to speak. Cadet, are you telling us that humans routinely train their non-military population in advanced combat techniques? Marcus realized he was walking into dangerous territory, but he couldn't see a way to avoid answering. Not advanced, sir. Basic self-defense, physical fitness, cultural traditions. Most forms are more about discipline and philosophy than actual fighting. Yet these basic techniques allowed you to defeat one of our finest military students, Commander Thessia observed. With respect, sir, Thrax isn't a soldier yet. He's a student, like me, and he wasn't expecting to fight someone who didn't follow standard patterns. Admiral Corthex stood, his massive frame dominating the room. That is precisely what concerns us, Cadet. If a human student with hobby training can defeat our best military prospects, what could trained human soldiers accomplish? The question hung in the air. Marcus could see where this was leading, and he didn't like the implications. Sir, I think you're reading too much into one fight. Are we? General Vrex activated a holographic display. We've analyzed Earth's military history. Cadet Chen, your species has been engaged in near-constant warfare for millennia. Not the ritualized combat practiced by most Alliance species, but total warfare involving entire populations. The display showed images from Earth's history, battles from every era, from ancient conflicts to modern warfare. Marcus recognized scenes from World War II, the Vietnam conflict, modern peacekeeping operations. Your species has developed military doctrine that's completely alien to Alliance thinking, Professor Corvash added. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla tactics, total war concepts. These are unfamiliar to species that evolved with natural advantages. Commander Thessia floated closer to Marcus. Most Alliance species fight to establish dominance or control resources. Humans appear to fight for survival, which creates entirely different strategic thinking. Admiral Corthex returned to his seat, his attention focused intently on Marcus. So we have a question for you, Cadet. Are you an anomaly, or are you representative of human military potential? Marcus thought carefully before answering. His response could affect not just his own future, but Earth's relationship with the entire Galactic Alliance. If he downplayed human capabilities, he might preserve the status quo but limit opportunities for his species. If he was honest about human adaptability and tactical thinking, he might trigger fears that could lead to restrictions, or worse. Sir, he said finally, I think I'm pretty typical for a human. We're not stronger or faster than most Alliance species. We don't have natural weapons or armor. But we do have something that served us well on Earth. Which is? We don't give up, ever. Put a human in an impossible situation and we'll find a way to survive. We'll use whatever tools are available, adapt to any environment, and keep fighting long after logic says we should quit. The 5 officers were silent for a long moment. Finally, Admiral Corthex spoke. That, Cadet Chen, is exactly what we were afraid you'd say. General Vrex leaned back in his chair. The Alliance has maintained peace for over 2 centuries because member species fight within understood parameters. We know how each other thinks, how each other fights. Balance is maintained through predictability. But humans don't fit the patterns, Commander Thessia added. Your species could destabilize military doctrine across the galaxy. Marcus felt a surge of anger. So what are you saying? That humans should be excluded from Alliance military service because we're too effective? No, Admiral Corthex said quietly. We're saying that human military integration will require careful management. Your species represents a paradigm shift in Alliance strategic thinking. Professor Corvash's sensor stalks focused on Marcus. There is another concern, Cadet. If humans can defeat our trained warriors with basic civilian techniques, how will other species react? Fear often leads to preemptive action. Marcus suddenly understood the real issue. His victory over Thrax hadn't just impressed the Academy. It had terrified the Alliance leadership. They were seeing humans not as new allies, but as potential threats to the existing order. "What happens now?" he asked. Admiral Korthek stood again. "Now, Cadet Chen, you help us understand exactly what humanity brings to the Alliance. We're establishing a new program to study human military doctrine and integration protocols. You'll be the first test subject." "And if I refuse?" The Admiral's scales darkened to black. "Then Earth's application for full Alliance membership may require reconsideration." Marcus met the Admiral's gaze without flinching. "In that case, sir, when do we start?" As he left the conference room, Marcus realized that his Arena victory had changed everything. Humans were no longer the galaxy's newest junior members. They were its newest wild card, a species that fought by no rules anyone else understood. The question now was whether the rest of the galaxy would learn to adapt to human unpredictability, or whether they'd decide it was safer to eliminate the threat before it could develop further. Either way, Marcus knew that his people's real test was just beginning. The Arena fight had been about individual strength. What came next would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars, or whether they'd have to fight for their right to exist in a galaxy that suddenly saw them as dangerous. The war for humanity's place in the cosmos wouldn't be fought with weapons or fleets. It would be fought with minds, determination, and the one quality that had always defined his species: the absolute refusal to surrender when survival was on the line.